behalf of the Raza Foundation and India Habitat Center, we welcome you this evening for the fourth Habib Tanvir Memorial Lecture. The earlier three lectures have been delivered by Sadanand Menon, who is fortunately here this evening, by Shanta Gokhale, and by Navjot Singh. The earlier list of three did not include a hard practitioner of the art. So we requested NEELAM MANSINGH to be our fourth speaker in that category. Now, I'm not going to read out a very long biodata because most of you who are here know about the significant contribution that NEELAM MANSINGH has been making to contemporary Indian theatre. Some people might not know, and they had better know, that there was a time when NEELAM was working with us in Bharat Bhavan, and she was working along with Karantati. And many of the wonderful things that we do in theatre and design and all that were due to her. Those people who are responsible for making of Bharat Bhavan, NEELAM also played a significant role. And of course, then after that, she has been teaching for a long while in Chandigarh, heading the department, and she created her own theatre company called Company, and her place in Chandigarh is a kind of a refuge for everybody, all kinds of people, various. One of the things that is significant about theatre is because it handles so many arts that it is more open to other arts, and at least NEELAM is very open to visual arts and to poetry. And there's one similarity between her and Habib Tanvir. And that is Habib Tanvir made use of the Chhattisgarhi folk singers. And NEELAM has made use of the Punjabi Nakkals and whatever they were called, Yogis or whatever. And she has created very vibrant theatre. She had performed in some of the major festivals internationally, including Festival the Avenue and several other factors. So there you are, NEELAM MANSINGH, navigating spaces, narratives, and processes. Frankly, I don't understand what she's going to say, nor anticipate that, but there you are. And I'm quite sure, although she is allegedly nervous, but I don't see any nervousness. All theatre people are nervous before the performance begins. And once the performance begins, it takes over. So hopefully, and you are free to speak from there, if that is all right, or come here, if that is fine. The rules of the game are that you speak for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then if there are any comments or questions, and anyone who is here should note that the questions have to be questions, and they have to be brief, and if possible, witty, and don't expect answers. The point is that it is important to ask questions, and in this country now it is becoming increasingly difficult even to ask questions. But anyway, we must continue to ask questions, and then hope that there will be some answers sometime. But hopefully, NEELAM will answer all your genuine questions. So there you are, NEELAM MANSINGH CHOWDHRY.
I was just wondering, should I show the video or should I speak first, whatever you say?
The mic's not on.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm asking Ashok, so.
No, whichever way you want. If you want to show it in the beginning, let it be.
I could show it in the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes
Are they ready? Whoever? How do I know?
sense.
तुम्हारा नाम क्या है? उसके बालों की तंग लेने वाला।
मैं कल ही लखनऊ छोड़कर दिल्ली चला जाऊंगा। आप लोग मेरा यकीन कीजिए, मैं जो कहूँगा सच कहूँगा। इस बात का हिंदू मुस्लिम फसाद से कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है। साहब, आप खुदा के लिए एक बार मेरी पूरी बात सुन लीजिए। देखिए, मैंने गिरधारी को नहीं मारा, और इसलिए तो बिल्कुल भी नहीं मारा कि वो एक हिंदू था। जब आप कहेंगे इसलिए नहीं मारा, तो फिर किस लिए मारा? लाश के सामने उसने मुझे अपने सामने बिठा दिया। मुझे लगा था मैं जिंदगी भर के लिए नामर्द हो गया हूँ, लेकिन साहब, जब उसका वो गरम डंडा मेरे बदन के साथ लगा, उसने एक अजीब और गरीब तरह का प्यार करना शुरू किया। साहब, सामने लाश पड़ी थी और मैं और रुकना
कि दूसरों के अंदर फंसे हुए थे।
quite an honor to be amongst all of you, especially under the banner of Habib Tanvir Memorial Lecture. All of us who are doing theatre, my generation, has been deeply impacted by Habib Saab's work. And I remember when I was a student at the NST, going to Triveni and seeing his Charandas joke, which even in recall leaves me spellbound. So thank you very much. I've got some stuff written down which I'd like to share with you. It's more about process and production. One day, I was feeling very depressed about the situation around me and asked my father, how are we supposed to function in such difficult times? How do we contribute anything useful in such a climate? You have two choices, answered my father. Either you convince yourself that in terrible times nothing will change, or you choose to believe that better times will come. If that is the situation, your job in dark political and social times is to gather all that you value, pack it up, and carry it on your back. In a similar register, I recall reading a story of the Dalai Lama. He was asked, would you like to be born again, even though the world is not going to change? And he said, yes, I would like to be born again if I can be useful. In a violent culture, attracted by fame and success, the notion of usefulness is indeed radical. Can art be useful? Art sometimes, I feel, is an exquisite and extravagant waste of time. Yet, art has some deep and enduring qualities that serve us at all times. As the poet Joseph Bronsky said, that art is the oxygen that arrives when your last breath is being expended. We are living in very particular times that demand a specific kind of response. No matter how many obstacles you encounter, political, financial, spiritual, the one thing we cannot afford is to feel that nothing can change or to become inactive due to despair. Manufactured certainty is the order of the day, and yet the concept of an open society is based on the fact that nobody is in possession of the ultimate truth. When you are in touch with complexities, it is impossible to be certain. For me, theatre has always been a place where I can see the world with different eyes, where truths can be tested, a disturbing and exciting space, fueling dreams and provoking fundamental questions about our lives. But before I begin, there's a small question that constantly nags me. Do I really matter? Does my work matter? Am I contributing anything of value to the already existing work? I work in the theatre because it helps me to articulate my daily life, challenges me, helps me to take decisions, teaches me how to reject and be part of a community. But I must confess that when I first started as a student, my passion for theatre began as a naive fantasy about an exciting world of possibilities. My interest was sincere, yet not based on any understanding of what it meant to be part of a world of drama and performance. The word art was floating around my head, but I had no ideas of the contours of the business when I, as a student, joined the history of art at Punjab University, Chandigarh. I was getting a bit bored and I had too much time on my hands, so I decided to join Balwant Gargi, the director and the playwright, who was living in Chandigarh at that time. At that point in my life, my involvement was about making life more interesting, rather than exploring any big passion for the arts. In most middle-class Punjabi homes, especially mine, that was in Amritsar, you could see art, theatre was a little far removed, as a hobby, but never see it as a viable profession. But in retrospect, I feel that the impulse within me that gravitated towards theatre was driven by a desire to interact with an isolated presence within the space of my imagination that could be transformed, harmonized, and analyzed. I still remember the night that I decided that theatre was what I wished to pursue. The National School of Drama had brought 2 plays to Chandigarh, and I had volunteered to help. It was startling to see work of such imagination, of such incredible visual imagery and intellectual rigor. I knew I had to drop everything and move in that direction. I joined the National School of Drama wondering, how does one learn acting? What are the tools of training? They were all questions in my head which really made no sense because I had nothing to access my queries with. Ibrahim Al-Qazi, who was the director of the school, taught me or exposed me to an aesthetics and a work ethics, and the single far most reaching impact he made on me, as he made, I'm sure, on other students, was to make us recognize that theatre was not like joining a hobby class. It required as much labor, hard work, dedication, and commitment as was required to be a doctor or an engineer. B.V. Karanth, with whom I worked in Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal, created an articulation of the evolving role of a director, of a search to produce a theatre that could express the complexities of contemporary reality. Taking into consideration training tools that had local origins, vernacular moorings, and regional sensibilities. These 2 disseparate approaches to theatre produced a strange alchemy within me. With no premeditated plan or design to put these 2 trainings together, I used it to counterbalance each other. When I moved to Chandigarh in 1984, my search for a way of working was based more on nostalgia rather than any real understanding of what I wished to do. I used the term nostalgia as I was feeling fairly wretched after moving away from Bhopal, and my yearning for those glorious days in Bharat Bhavan made me wish to recreate the Bharat Bhavan experience in Chandigarh. During my meanderings, I started working with the Nakal performers and actors from Chandigarh. I was not interested in the form as something material that needed to be imitated or cited, and neither was I looking for an exotic leitmotif by which I could decorate my work. What interested me were how 2 groups of people coming from separate worlds could make a work of art together. My creative journey into Punjab, formalizing a process of training and creating performances through translations, through collaborations between regions and cultures, and even across genders, became my challenge. The first time I met the group that I'm working with, they were performing in a village square, singing, dancing, ad-libbing, telling stories. A mixture of pop art and natural fun was their chosen vocabulary. The stories they enacted were pan-Indian myths conjoining local myths, transformed and renewed for local meaning. The gods they evoked rode bicycles, aspired for a sarkari naukri, and cursed like crazies on a rampage. In the middle of a tragedy, a horse appeared and started singing. In the episode of the famous love legend Sohini Mewal, the matka on which Sohini is traveling to cross the river Chenab suddenly animates itself and starts to take the narrative forward. While watching them perform in the Ram Leela, I saw that how suddenly the female impersonators would gyrate furiously and seductively to the song Jhumka Gira Re Ravan Ke Darbar Mein. It was wonderful to see how the sacred and the profane, the serious and the comic segued. This theatrical device did not fit into any known grammar of performance that I had been exposed to. To see a large number of people sitting under a starlit night and pumping energy and excitement into the performers made me realize that something precious and real was being exchanged. Something snapped within me, as most of us going to the theatre in the 80s involved sitting in neat rows in the dark and hardly acknowledging the presence of strangers with whom you are sitting shoulder to shoulder. Certainly never expecting the actors to invade our space or for us to claim theirs. Working with them changed all that. Suddenly, the performance and the life, art and everyday activity between the play and playing were blurred. I have been running my theatre company for the last 30 years. I work with them and I also sometimes work outside the actors that I have with me. And sometimes, even when I work outside, I collaborate with them, especially the musicians. Earlier, most of the work that I did was based on what we call the well-made play, where roles would be distributed, lines would be learned, and blocking would be done. At the present moment, I'm guided more by what I don't want rather than what I want. What I want still remains unclear. I don't tell actors, don't do this. I don't tell actors what to do, but I certainly tell them what I don't wish them to do. I think a lot of us, a lot of directors write what they want before actually directing a play. In my case, I write after I have directed the play. The method that we use for creating any piece of work is based entirely on improvisations. Improvisation is the common language that I use. An idea or a text is shared, but the actors are not always required to learn the lines. They must comprehend the situation and have some idea of the context in which they are situated. But within that, there are many risks that I wish them to take for them to discover what I call the unwritten text. It's almost like a traveling kit. I give certain suggestions that are both physical as well as conceptual. I also provide them with different objects and different costumes. Many times the actors produce something entirely different from what I've suggested. The actors, for me, provide the raw material. Sometimes actors create through an improvisation a fully realized idea. And sometimes it's a kind of a sketch which I can pull out and create and construct a scene. In an improvisation, each participant has the same power in the creation of an event. The aesthetic thinking is also non-hierarchical. An object would have the same importance as the human body. The spoken word could be on equal footing with the gesture. One idea could hold the same significance as another. Theatre is practice-oriented. And during the course of my work, I have realized that every aesthetic decision I make has to be a practical one as well. What sort of costume should the actor wear? What kind of stage business should I give the character? If I edit a speech, will it disturb the meaning? How do I position the actors on the stage? Rehearsals, for me, are a means of setting an exact sequence of events. Preparing for a role is a constant state of training so that when the situation arises, one is ready to do that which is appropriate for the scene. Improvisations are considered a valid process for preparing a role. But this should not in any way suggest that only the spontaneous response of the moment is needed to create theatre. The response of the moment occurs through a very complex ballet of the mind and the heart. When this occurs intuitively and without tension, it releases a feeling of sheer spontaneity. As Stanislavski said in An Actor Prepares, we have to work very hard to appear spontaneous on stage. What he meant by this was that a performance is not only rehearsed and performed, but is also prepared through a complex journey that is both physical and internal. I personally, when I work more on the level of intuition. For me, it's not about control. I do not come to rehearsal all mapped out, completely confident about what's going to happen. I have no definite ideas, and I don't give those instructions to the actor that these are my ideas and now you have to make them visible and concrete. Directing, for me, is about feelings. It's about being in a room with other people, with actors and musicians. It's about a feel for time and space, about breathing, about responding. To be able to plunge into the unknown and hope that the actors will take the plunge with you. It's not about understanding what's going on. It's about meeting someone you do not know. It's about uncertainty. That is why I've always believed that certain aspects of the production are set and a lot of them are open. In other words, do we set the form or the content? Do we set the action or the emotions? Rehearsals are about eliciting those emotions and then fixing them. However, human emotions are ephemeral and cannot be summoned at will. Therefore, I am convinced that I need to set the external elements, the choreography, the action, the objects, the movement, and allow the interior, the ever-altering inner landscape to move and change. This way of working, for me, is not because I'm more interested in form, but it's because I wish to acknowledge human experience and the freedom of emotions. I may use a conventional set or a realistic set, or it could be a suggestive notion of what the set or what the space should look like. But I like the space to be completely animated by objects. These elements or these objects, for me, are not mere props as much as they are elements of production with their own voice. They speak without the actor having to give them a name. A tray of water can suggest a river, a burnt car can suggest a genocide, and a tinsel cloth can suggest a snake. I'm using these examples because I've used them in some of my productions. We also know that no text can be dreamed by different directors in the same way. It will always be imagined by different directors in different ways at different points of time. To take a text and assign a single corresponding interpretation to it is to somewhere impose a limit on the text. Every work is written here and now, and with each rereading, fresh meanings will emerge. Meaning is not always determined by language itself, but by the impact on the actors, how he internalizes it and makes it his own. A text, for me, is dead when there's an absence of exchange. In other words, a text becomes dead when it does not travel, change, or exchange or evolve. A playwright is a poet. He's a metaphysician. He's a historian. However, once a play has been written, it has a life of its own that goes sometimes beyond the intentions, actually most times, beyond the intentions of the playwright itself. The play comes alive differently in the mind of the director and in the body of the actor. Many people believe that theatre is a space where an actor just recites a given text, illustrating it with a series of movements and actions in order to make it understood. Interpreted this way, a text becomes an accessory to the dramatic literature. The images that are produced by the text aren't just images by themselves. They are pieces of fabric that we may stitch into a performance. Every word that is written has a history that is older than the tongue that has spoken it, and every myth has many masters. In this way, we can see that the images that appear in the play are drawn from multiple cultural sources, and therefore each play has many authors brought to life through the performance. I am drawn to the many voices that speak through the text. Is it possible to talk about Indian culture as a monolith? A country which speaks in so many voices, that lives simultaneously in so many eras and has a complex and rich history, cannot be standardized or encapsulated by singular notions of identity. In a nation which has as much power and beats through our blood as much as the modern, the only solution is to create without subordinating one to the other. The truth is that the past persists and the modern persists, and the future is not a victory between the two. The material that enters into performance comes from dreams and memories, and these are not exclusively modern or traditional. I always ask myself, especially because I take so many plays from the West and make them travel to Punjab in the Punjabi language and using energies and textures that come from the region in which I perform. So there was this huge debate about appropriation and do we have a right to represent a text written in a different place and make it travel and through this whole transformation, what is lost, what is gained. These were many issues that are debatable. So I always ask myself, what is cultural space and what are its limits? Do the local meanings that are found in Greek classics or in Sanskrit plays or in Shakespeare not carry within them the echoes of humanity? If you look at the country's most popular sports, clothing, music, cuisine, we will find that all of these have a long and complex cultural heritage that travel far beyond national boundaries. Yet, the dominant and popularized narrative about our cultural identity is one monolithic concept of belonging, whose values of purity, authenticity, homogeneity are all based on negation of the dynamic exchange that brings all cultures into being. Can there be limits to one's influence? Being an Indian makes me a multitude, perhaps a multitude of singularities. When I direct a play, whether it is a Jean Racine or a Federica Garcia Lorca or a Rabindranath Tagore, I always try to bring the play to the present moment, to bring the characters into a context where they might unfold and reveal the stories of mankind. Is it the present? Is it a historical moment of the past? Is it an imaginary country or society? Because each play carries a baggage of their own histories. Interior context becomes the issue for me that needs to be explored. The story may not connect with some immediate dilemma within me or what the world is undergoing. As sometimes what we yearn for is the fantastic, is the impossible, is the imaginary. Many times people want to travel outside themselves, hence a need for fantasy, the need for an imaginative world. Yet, can that imagined world exclude the realities that we are surrounded by, the dark forces that threaten our freedom and our safety and our existence? My work with my company does not set out to tell a moral story, to sway public opinion, or to campaign a cause. It attempts to provide a glimpse of an alternate existence, animate reality, explore its vulnerabilities. A space where sometimes I always feel I mustn't fall into the trap of an idea and search for the true, not the realistic. The true is not always realistic, because to enter a stage is to enter into a symbolic space where everything is imagined. I always wonder, what is that one moment that altered your life? Is it the questions is a question I ask myself. Is it the people I met, the details of the experience that touched my life and changed me? I suppose what I am today as a person is a combination of many elements, things that I've seen, heard, smelt, eaten, remembered and forgotten. It's all stored within me and spills out into my workspace. All these experiences combined with my training are what I struggle to understand as an artist, and I only understood them through my rehearsal space with my actors. But yet, when we're talking about influences, I'd like to mention that there were many things that changed and altered the way I respond to the universe. Being a student of B.N. Goswami and Ibrahim Alkasi, collaborating with B.V. Karant and the poet Surjit Patar, my years spent at Bharat Bhavan, teaching at the Punjab University, the actors I work with, my musicians, the female impersonators. The list is long. But I would like to just mention one experience that somewhere shook up something within me about the way I related to what was possible on the stage, which was the impossible could be brought to the stage. And I'm sure many of you must have also shared something similar, which was in the, I think, early 90s or mid-90s, when I heard about Pina Bausch performing in Delhi. I'd heard the name, but this was prior to internet, prior to Google, prior to YouTube. So one was familiar, one had heard the name, but there was no visual material to support the reason why one wished to come and see her work. I was teaching at the university. I brought all my students on a study tour, and we came to the Shri Fort auditorium and went to see the work. The play's name was Carnations, Nelken. It changed somewhere all my tidy and neat definitions of what was possible on the stage. There was a stage that was covered with carnations. Women in flowing gowns are crawling amongst the flowers, giggling and playing leapfrog before they were confronted with passport officers and snarling dogs, people pouring coffee on their head, men sniffing onions, while a nude woman carries an accordion, which she never plays, walking silently across the stage. I was completely bewildered and immediately rejected the work, as I had no tools to access the experience that had unfolded before me. But the show clung to me, haunting me, making me restless. The work was incoherent like a dream, a series of non sequiturs, but something changed within me. Somehow, this experience made me realize the immense potential of the stage. We do consider it a very in terms of how many meters and how many feet. But yet, somewhere watching that production made me realize the kind of endless ways one could create combinations and permutations on the stage. When a character enters a stage, he carries his world. I saw how boundaries can dissolve, how space can be expanded. And then I realized that through my work, I was leading multiple lives. In Nagamandala, by Girish Karnad, I reflected that moments of love, moments of happiness, do they really happen or do we imagine them? In Yarma, I learned that the artist, and particularly the poet, is always an anarchist in the best sense of the word. He must heed the call that arises within him. The voice of death, the voice of art, the voice of love. In Phedra, I understood the systems of patriarchy. When Phedra cries, how these vain ornaments, how these veils oppress me. In Kitchen Katha, a play about food and storytelling and women, I realized that each of us is born with a matchbox inside us, but we need someone to strike it. We cannot do it ourselves. Working on these plays was my way of leading many lives, of becoming many people, of understanding myself. I've always tried to place my work where I have put the ordinary with the unfamiliar, the absurd with the meaningful, cheek by jowl. But yet, I'm always concerned with this question that the work that we are doing, are we really reflecting the concerns that we face in our daily life, the newspapers that we read, the politics that we have to encounter? But sometimes we ourselves do not know to what extent we are talking about ourselves, about our times, about our divisions, about our intolerance, our hatred. I don't think that theatre, at least the kind of theatre I do, can really adapt itself to real activism. We are politically minded, but sometimes not always militant. Theatre is not journalism, it's not the police, it's not the army. It's sometimes difficult to be pushed by actual events. It has to do with passion and humanity. The theatre, even as it entertains, is always a search for meaning. It's a quest. One of the basic functions of art is what the Greeks called catharsis. According to Aristotle, catharsis is the purifying and cleansing of emotions by evoking a sense of fear and pity in the audience. The etymology of the word catharsis is to shine through dark spaces. Yet, when we try to explore the dark spaces in our soul through our work, very often we have a tendency to shut the issues with the busy work of the daylight hours. But without looking into these dark spaces, as Carl Jung said, we will lose our essential humanity. All the world's a stage becomes true in a different sense by plays written in a particular language specific to its cultural locale can travel to different cultures, languages, historical periods, and get transformed through the journey. Peer Gynt, peeling an onion, in search of the Gentian self, is an image that finds resonance in all of us without resorting to any euphemism. Drama has remained for me an attempt shared between the actor and the audience to peel away the layers of an onion to see its heart. In theatre, as in other arts, metaphor is created to articulate what is most difficult to express or difficult to realize. Metaphor is pointing indirectly in order to look at something directly. But also metaphor in a certain way adds deeper, more subtle and complex levels of meaning. The theatre, as the other arts, is an art form that employs metaphors consistently and constantly. Today, most of us are targets of mass distraction, objects of constant flattery and manufactured desires. I believe this can all be resisted by a certain quality we bring in our life. We do know that the world is unjust, vicious, and unbearable. But within that, I know my development as a person is directly proportional to my quality of discomfort. When I'm constantly confronted by conflict, I feel restless. I feel I have to do something. My chosen field of action is a theatre, because because theatre is not only about narratives and entertainment, but also about something that reminds us of the wonder and passion we've always had for the world, but may have forgotten. Thank you.
Well, friends, after this very lively and very insightful presentation, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and raise the question. Yes.
एक तो बहुत शानदार तकरीर आपने की, और चूँकि मैंने आपके नाटक बहुत सारे चंडीगढ़ में 10 साल रहा, और आखिरी जो अभी जो आपने दिखाया मंटो की कहानियों पे, उसको भी मैंने देखा है, और जो कुछ आपने पढ़ा भी, कहना चाहिए कि एक शानदार पीस ऑफ प्रोज वो भी उनको सुनने को मिला। एक चीज़ जो आपने कही कि जो है वो थिएटर एक्टिविज्म नहीं है, बाय एंड लार्ज मैं इससे सहमत हूँ कि कोई भी कला का फॉर्म जो है वो एक्टिविज्म, जिसको आजकल एक्टिविज्म कहते हैं कि किसी बगावत, कोई खास कॉज को लेकर के आप लिखते हैं तो उसका एक मकसद है, एक पॉलिटिकल कोई एजेंडा लेके पार्टी का कोई काम कर रहा है, तो वो एक्टिविज्म है और वो कला का एक अलग दुनिया है। लेकिन फिर भी जो लोग इस किस्म की एक्टिविज्म में नहीं शरीक हैं, वो भी कभी वक्त बेवक्त इतिहास में मौका आने पर वो ब्रेस्ट की तरह नहीं, न बादल सरकार की तरह, लेकिन मैं अगर आगे का उदाहरण दूं जो हम बार बार अक्सर देते हैं उनके करीब रहने के नाते, तो वो तो खुद इसके खिलाफ थे, और जो हमारे यहाँ पे जो लेफ्टिस्ट लोग थे वो उनको गाली देते थे कि आप तो फूल पत्ती की कविता लिखते हैं। पर इमरजेंसी में जिन लोगों ने कविता लिखी इमरजेंसी के खिलाफ, उनमें आगे बहुत ही रेयर जो लोग थे उनमें एक थे। तो ऐसा कभी दौर चलता है। आपने ये जो मंटो की कहानियों पे किया, मेरा मानना ये है कि ये भी एक तरह से एक्टिविज्म का फॉर्म है, क्योंकि इस दौर में, जिस दौर में अभी हम हैं, अगर कोई बहुत प्रोग्रेसिव, बहुत ही खुला परिवेश हो देश में, फिर तो शायद ना हो, लेकिन अभी जब इस तरह की चीज़ें, इस तरह की चीज़ों पे बात करना, मेरा पक्का मानना है कि आपने एनएसडी में जहाँ पे इसे किया था बच्चों को सिखाते हुए, अगर आप इसको किसी खुले में नागपुर में या कहीं और आज के बाद शायद लखनऊ वगैरह में भी जाके करें तो ये तो मुश्किल होगा। लोग कहेंगे कि आप बगावत है, ये तो एक अलग तरह का समाज बनाने की कोशिश है। तो आपने एक्टिविज्म को, मेरा सवाल सिर्फ ये है कि इतना जो सीमित फॉर्म में रखा है, इसको अगर थोड़ा सा और इसका खुलासा हो तो अच्छा हो।
आई थिंक जो मैंने मोंटो की कहानियाँ की हैं, वो सब जो कहानियाँ मैंने चुनी, वो सब इट्स अबाउट लॉस, इट्स अबाउट होमलेसनेस, इट्स अबाउट फ्रैक्चर्स, इट्स अबाउट मतलब कहीं ना कहीं कलाकार अपने आप को अपने वक्त से वंचित तो रख नहीं सकता, वो कहीं ना कहीं रिस्पॉन्ड करता है जो स्थिति आसपास है। When I talked about activism, I had a certain kind of theatre in mind. It's like Brecht also says that, it's like a ship with sails. You cannot go against the winds of your time. आप winds के साथ चल सकते हैं या उसके विरुद्ध चल सकते हैं, पर winds का या हवाओं का वजूद आप अपने आप से नहीं अलग कर सकते. So that way we are all responding to our times in our own way. But when I was using the word activism, I was using it in a very narrow, specific sense, and I was only using it for myself. I was not making a general statement. I don't think any of the things that I was really referring to had to do with generalities. It's very specific to the way I approach my work. But yes, I mean, both the stuff that I did with the students at the NST, it all had to do with, there was a sense of what was happening in Syria, lost homelands, the creation, but within that, how people still live and survive. So these issues are, I think, of great concern to all of us.
Hello. Yes, ma'am, here. Myself, Vaishali. I'm an artist of Indian People Theatre Association. 16 years I span. I just want to know about the Mohan Rakesh. मोहन राकेश के जितने भी नाटक हैं सिर्फ 4 ही नाटक हैं, लहरों के राजहंस, आधे अधूरे, जिनमें से ही मैंने कई बार पढ़े हैं। तो इनमें जो अंतर्द्वंद की बातें आती हैं वो बेसिकली उसी पर लिखा करते थे, अंतर्द्वंद पर। तो मैं इसके बारे में आपसे जानना चाहती हूँ, क्योंकि मुझे अभी तक इनके नाटकों की जो भी मैंने पढ़ा तो अंतर्द्वंद का असली मुझे मतलब समझ में नहीं आया। क्या आप मुझे डिफाइन कर पाएंगी?
The conflict is kind of inbuilt in, it's like variables and the tension between two polarities. तो मोहन राकेश के नाटक हो या कोई भी नाटक हो, उसमें conflict और tension और वो तो होता ही है. It's part of the whole thing of how a play is written, or the structure of a play, or the structure of a novel. It does have conflict, it does have points of views or multiple points of view. I don't know actually how to answer it. I just don't know.
Yes.
Hello. Just a background. I'm an aspiring playwright. I'm very interested in the creative side.
Keep it close to you.
Sorry. Aryawas?
Ah.
So I'm just I'm aspiring playwright. I'm very interested in the creative process of this. I have a very late start on the playwriting part. I had a different life before that. So looking at your work and you're describing your sort of journey, I find that there are extremely strong and compelling subjective elements. So your interpretations of how you choose to see the world, how you choose to sort of depict it, what are the elements that you sort of extract from the various, for example, Bantos. I've seen, by the way, the last one, which you showed on the clip. So the question at a personal level, I think, is two questions. One is, of course, how do you, as someone who's an artist who's already, gone through that journey, how does one sort of navigate, and sort of figure out, okay, these are the things which I want to do not do, or can't do? Because they are very personal choices. They are challenges which I think any artist would sort of face. So one is, of course, if you could share, I think some of you did it, but it would be nice to sort of get some more on that. The other is the metaphors that you have, like some of the elements there, which were, honestly, some of them were bewildering, but you have put them there for a reason, because for you that depicts the metaphor depicts a certain condition you want to do it. How do you know that subjectively interpreted metaphor is going to actually work for the audience? How is it that you have that sense of knowledge or the confidence which say, okay, this is going to work for it?
I have no confidence and I have no certainties. It's something that strikes me. It's been through a certain journey why you choose a certain thing, and you just hope that what it communicates to you will expand itself to be shared with the audience. And I have, over the years, I think at this stage I feel I can take many more risks. As I said, I think I used one of these thoughts that it's really about not knowing. It's about uncertainty. It's about meeting the stranger. And it's not about understanding. Sometimes some of the elements or objects that I used, you may not fully comprehend it in rational terms, but somehow it just seems right. You develop, you try to do something which works for you, with the hope that somewhere it communicates to who you're sharing it with. Because I mean, telling a story is also about sharing a story. So it's not that one is negating that dimension at all. So it's a language you create, a language of images, a language of metaphors. And maybe because you saw little snippets, sometimes there is something that leads to that moment.
Please.
Anybody else? Yes, please. Take the...
नीलम जी, आपका बहुत सुंदर व्याख्यान सुना। और मैं राजीव मीडिया में काम करता हूँ, थिएटर से भी थोड़ा जुड़ा रहा हूँ। मेरी जिज्ञासा थोड़ी ये थी कि जो आजकल साहित्य में, कलाओं में, खासतौर से साहित्य में स्त्री विमर्श की चर्चा काफी होती है, और उसका एक पक्ष ये भी होता है कि जो यथार्थ है, एक अनुभूत यथार्थ है, एक देखा हुआ संवेदनात्मक यथार्थ है। तो थिएटर की दुनिया में जहाँ अगर इस सवाल को रखा जाए कि ये जो स्त्री विमर्श है, विमेंस डिस्कोर्स है, ये किस तरह फलीभूत हुआ है, क्योंकि अब ऐसी सिचुएशंस भी मैंने देखी हैं कि कुछ लेखिकाएं हैं, जब उनसे बात होती है तो वो कहती हैं कि देखिए, मुझे उस स्त्री विमर्श के साथ जोड़कर मत रखिए, हमारा जो स्त्री विमर्श तो हमारे साथ है, लेकिन ये वो स्त्री विमर्श नहीं है जो कि चर्चा में है। तो मुझे लगता है कि थिएटर की दुनिया में, चूंकि आप उन लोगों में, और आपने बहुत अच्छी तरह सारी चीजों का इस्तेमाल किया है, देह का इस्तेमाल भी किया है, देह मुद्राओं का इस्तेमाल भी किया है, तो क्या आप समझती हैं कि ऐसी कोई चीज थिएटर की दुनिया में भी प्रोजेक्ट हो रही है?
You know, I think I'm a bit scared of generalities. You know, when you talk about women's issues and women's theatre, एक तरह का वो गेटो सा बन जाता है। मुझे लगता है कि जब when women came into theatre, sometimes I think when they started, I know you can help me out on that one, when a voice, a woman's voice came into theatre, I think what happened is that women had nothing to lose. You know, because the word director has such a male resonance. It has to do with authority and control. So women kind of just slipped in. And I think because there were no templates before them, it became a very free space for them to explore, to take a kind of risk that perhaps was something that was not in the so-called established theatre. And I think the other thing that happened is that women always thought of theatre as collaborative. They never thought that there was one figure that was in control and everyone else had to obey the orders. They distributed the work, so it became fairly non-hierarchical. And they weren't dealing with, they suddenly, at least what I feel, what my perception is, that suddenly epics, you know, like Tughlaq and King Lear and Hamlet, was replaced by something much more domestic, something more what you would call a woman's world, where you started talking about women washing clothes, cooking food. It didn't have to do in terms of how women were perceived, but in the domestic space, something epic was emerging. And the other thing I felt was that they moved away from what you call the beginning, middle, and end, a kind of linear development of structure. It became more circular, it crisscrossed. So a lot of, and it's not that all the women working in theatre were working in a particular manner. I think even with, the only familiarity was that they were all part of this, they were all part of being women. I mean, even when I work in Chandigarh, there are other women also working there. And I work in the, I mean the last two plays have been in Hindi, but I work in the Punjabi language. But even within that, there is, I may be working in the Punjabi theatre, but I'm also working in my own particular way. So within that, there are proclivities, there are your own creative affiliations, they are your own, it's your own way of the way you look at space, how you look at text, how you look at objects, the kind of objects you use. So I think any term that is an umbrella term can't really apply to the arts, I think.
But there is an impact and there is a distinctive feel about it. From what you said, that the tools you employ, the images you, and as you said that from epical proportions to more domestic. So
Yes, of course. That shift was happening. And also I think a lot of women stopped really, even if they used a text, they juggled it around, they tossed it around, they reworked it. So there was some interest. As I said, they took risks because they had nothing to lose. Nobody took them seriously.
Yes, this is a question, since of course this is the Habib Tanvir Memorial Lecture, so inevitably one thinks back to his amazing contribution. So I was just wondering, with respect to, since you also worked with forms in Punjab, what kind of research did that entail? Because some of the forms may have themselves not retained the same, say, qualities that, say, folk theatre once had. Modernity has had its impact, the violence of modernity is redoing those forms even as you're engaging with them as a creative artist, as a theatre person. So what kind of research were you able to do to be able to access the idioms, if you like, of the folk or the forms, even the mythologies and the narrative traditions of the Punjab which you've been thinking about? And was Habib Tanvir at all also an influence in this mix? Thank you.
But I think what was happening is this whole, Sangeet Natak Academy started this theatre for roots, theatre in search of your roots. And a lot of people were getting a certain kind of money to go back to their regions and dip into regional sensibilities and forms to try and create a training methodology for contemporary theatre. Because till then, most drama schools had a training that was based on Stanislavski and Meyerhold and Western tools of training. I think this trend had started, and somehow you all breathe that trend. But let me tell you, Punjab was very particular because Punjab does not have any continuous or firm tradition. And the reasons are political, they are social, there's the Green Revolution, where suddenly these folk traditions, the group that I work with, they worship a Muslim Peer. When I first started working with them, they have Hindu names, but most of the ceremonies conducted during marriages and death are Sikh ceremonies. So in a certain way, it's a wonderful conglomeration of what India was, the pluralistic, moving into one and the other and not being categorized and packed into little silos. Some of them stayed on in Punjab, but somehow the viability of their work was not really being supported by the community that supports it. They were more interested in Hindi films or in T. Jayashree and Helen Ke dances, So that suddenly there'd been a shift in a kind of how we wish to be entertained. So when I think it had a lot to do with my Bharat Bhavan experience. I owe a lot to my 4 years that I spent there. I think it was to me one of the most vital and significant periods of my life, which in a certain way, I never took myself seriously I'd done the NST, but I never took myself seriously. I was quite happy being peripheral to the whole world of theatre. It's Bharat Bhavan which kind of entrenched and embedded something very deep within me. And there, Karanji had worked out a program which is called Purvarang, where master performers were invited to work with actors of the Rang Mandal, which was the repertory, state-run repertory in Bharat Bhavan. Now, when you talk about urban actors, I'm not talking about actors from Delhi. I'm talking about actors from Bina, Guna, Chhindwara, who were terribly inhibited and unsure and had all kinds of blocks that needed to be released. So this was wonderful because when they started, the moment some sound came, suddenly something else started happening in the body. The memory, the resonance of something lost, something forgotten, aroused a certain relationship with their body. So that was a very interesting thing that used to happen. in Bharat Bhavan. And it was almost like every weekend there used to be this Purvarang program. Somehow I was trying to replicate, as I mentioned, my whole love for my few years spent there. So I started searching for forms. So I worked with the Gatka tradition, I worked with the Jangams, I worked with the Taddis. So it was basically an exploration. Then I came across this group of Nakals. I mean, they were actually, the female impersonators were quite happy being hermaphrodites and being at road crossings or going to somebody, you know, bacha paida hua, to wahan dance karna. It was all a question of rosy roti. They were really poor. You know, they had no home, they had no address. I did a workshop with them, and somehow, you know, there's some groups that just come to stay. You know, so they just kind of came to stay. They just never left me. I don't know how it happened. There was no roadmap, there was no grand design. It just so happened that we started working together. Now, of course, I had to understand their world. And why would they let me enter their world? So the only space we had in which they allowed me to enter their world was money. You know, I paid them, they would take me around. So I traveled a lot in different places. I come from Amritsar, so a lot of them in Jandiala and Baro, you know, so a lot of places around Amritsar, their performances would be, and I would follow them. Then initially, to understand what it was all about, I had to train myself. Because I must tell you, when I moved to Punjab, or you know, Chandigarh is not exactly Punjab, I couldn't even read and write the language. So for me, it was not only a journey in understanding a form, but it was also a journey into understanding language, reading it, writing it, because you can't, you know, I just felt I had to do it. And then I did 2 productions with them, which was based on their stories. One was Kima Malki, which is like Sohini Mehwal, it's a love story. And one was Raja Bhartrihari, which was by NEELAM Chatrak. So the first one was part of the oral tradition. The second one was part of a text which was available. So through that whole, and of course I was, you know, also doing workshops also. I mean, it was a process. And then initially when I worked, you know, initially they would just be sitting and doing the music. And let me tell you, they have musical instruments, but they use it in a manner which is very, very simple. If it's a tumbi, it's just ting-a-ting-a-ting, you know, it's not that they have any variations. But the 22 years that I collaborated with B.V. Karant, who came and designed the music for all my shows, from Nagamandala to Yarma, to Fedra, to Kitchen Katha, to etc., etc., he taught them how to use traditional instruments in a non-traditional manner. And he also taught them that anything that can create sound can be a musical instrument. So his input in creating, you know, upping their bar was very significant. And so they could, you know, I mean, when they came, they really had some stories, they had some songs, they could play certain musical instruments, small, what you call small instruments, which they made themselves. But it wasn't what you would call high art. It wasn't any firm tradition. They'd lost that. And their children don't see it as a viable profession. So they are very happy to sell helmets, watermelon during, I mean, we were going to Avignon, they were selling watermelons, you know. So it was all a question of rosy roti, because I can't employ them for 12 months, because you can't work for 12 months. So they have to do alternative things. So they do jagaratas, they work in the Ram Leela, they go and pay the toll somewhere, and then they come. So when I talked about navigating spaces, it's also the kind of travel that they do when suddenly they're doing a Yarma or a Fedra or whatever.
Well, with that we come to the...
I do have a question.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry.
Well, go ahead.
A kind of gate crash. The thing is, you know, you answered my query somewhat, but what I feel, as you said, that it's a reflection of our times as an artist. Now, the thing is that you do, every day you do some kind of art forms which tell us things which we need to do, which we should do. we should live together, in a harmonious way, but we're not able to do it, follow it. And at the same time, telling the same thing again and again can be very frustrating, right? As an artist, sending a message across, the messages which we should follow, which we know, but you can see that it's not happening in the society. So you as an artist, sending the same message across to the audience, or trying to convey the same message can be frustrating, right? That's my, how do you cope with it?
No, I don't send messages. No, I
You
don't
don't
do
even
that.
receive them.
I mean, it's really a glimpse in a certain kind of world, animating it in a manner which may not be every day. I don't know how to answer that. It's not a newspaper. This is not a space where you pass on information or tell a moral tale.
Yeah, moral tales, right? Yeah.
I don't do that.
So you don't go by
No.
that. That's
There used to be moral replays.
Yes, of
Well,
course.
friends, with that we come to the end of the evening. We had a very brilliant presentation and equally brilliant question-answer session. So thank you very much. But we in the Raza Foundation do not rest, neither on our laurels, nor allow anybody else to rest on her laurels. So we have on the 28th, 29th, along with Natrang Pratishthan, two evenings, afternoons and evenings, devoted to listening to 4 major theatre groups of Delhi. That is Deshantar, Delhi Art Theatre, and what? Abhiyan, and one more, and Yatri. And some of the actors and people who work there will be coming and talking about their experiences. So you are most welcome. This will be held in the Ravindra Bhavan. On the 30th March, we have a poetry read. We are starting a new series called Kavita Aaj. And we have 4 young poets, one from Ambikapur and the other from Banaras and 2 from Delhi, reading their poems at the India International Center Annex. On 7th, 8th, 9th April, we are starting a Raza Biennale of poetry. And these 3 days will be devoted to Indian poetry, 45 poets from 15 languages. And also discussion on poetry as freedom, poetry as conscience, poetry as memory. On the 12th April, in our rather popular series now, Art Matters, we have a conversation with Sudarshan Shetty, the artist and the curator of Kochi Biennale this time. And on the 14th, we have another memorial lecture, Guru Kelucharan Mahapath Memorial Lecture, to be delivered by Kumudini Lakhia, talking about Kathak in our times. So all of you are most welcome to all these events. I can assure you those evenings will be rich, well worth your visit, and you won't be doing anything more important than I know that.